Here, I'm going to show you how to make a workbook automatically close after so much time of inactivity. So the user hasn't done anything here for 5 minutes and it automatically closes. I'll also show you how to add a little confirmation window that could say something like, are you still working? Yes or no. If they click yes, the workbook doesn't close. If they click no, it will close. And I'm going to show you lots of little areas where you can adjust this. So change the time, change how the confirmation window works, or if you even have one, lots of very interesting little things. And here we have the lovely window that asks you if you're still working or not. If I click no, it's going to close. Yes, it lets me continue to work. And what I'm showing you here is a small fraction of the many amazing things that you can do with VBA and macros for Excel. And those allow you to automate your workbooks to save yourself hours of time every week. And I have a full course on that that'll take you from beginner and intermediate level all the way to advanced and expert level. That course has over 200 tutorials and 200 downloadable Excel reference files with notes and code that you can copy and paste into any project to get a jump start on it. It is a course built to save you time. And I have a link to it in the description below this video, so check that out. If you want to get the file that you see in this tutorial, there will be a link for that below this video as well. So 2 separate links, very helpful content. But now it's time to make this seemingly simple thing work, and we've got a few pieces to put together for it. And to get started, hit Alt F11 to go to the VBA window. The very first thing is to go to Insert and Module. And let's go ahead and create all the little pieces that are going to allow us to have a timer and make it work, and then close the workbook. And then we're going to add a few things after that to, well, make it work a lot better. So first off, we need 2 variables at the top here accessible for the entire module. This right here is a module, and the first variable is going to be how long we wait before we are essentially going to kill this Excel workbook. So let's make kill time as a variant and procedure name as a string. And this is going to be the name of the macro that we want to run after this much time has passed. And we have to put it up here because we need to access these values between separate macros, and this is going to make our life a lot easier. So these guys are module wide, and let's go ahead and start with the main timer. So how about we go start main timer. Give it a little bit of space. And the way that we're going to do this, the magic is going to be application.onTime. And for that, we have a few arguments. We're going to be using earliest time, procedure, and later on schedule. So earliest time is when it's going to try and run whatever we give it in procedure. Procedure is going to be a string, so text, the name of the macro, the procedure, the sub that we want to run. And we're going to be running all of that through these 2 variables. So we can set this guy up right now. Kill time is going to be the earliest time, and the procedure is going to be procedure name. But let's go ahead and actually put some values in that. So this is the magic in this tutorial. It may be the only new thing that you learn if you already know how to make user forms and do everything else. But now let's go ahead and add all the things that will make this work a lot better. So for kill time, what we want to do is to get the current time, and then how long do we want to wait from now until we try to close the workbook. We use the time value function for that and give it time as a string. And it's going to look like this, 00, 00, 00, 00. Seconds, minutes, hours, and we could go ahead and maybe make it 5 minutes, maybe make it 30 minutes, or if you want to test it out, make it a much shorter number, maybe 15 seconds. So that way you can run it much faster. But for this, let's go ahead and just pop it at 5 minutes. And for procedure name, well, we don't have a procedure name right now, but we're about to create one. And the procedure that I want to run here is going to be called display working confirmation. And this gets me to how this is going to work. So this right here is going to run this procedure after this much time has passed. And if you do not want to ask the user if they want to continue working, you could send them then to the procedure that closes the window. However, we do not want to do that. We want to ask the user if they are still working or not. As a result, we are going to send this guy to another macro that is going to show the window that asks the user if they want to continue or not. And in the process of doing that, we will start another new timer so that window won't just be up there forever. And once that new timer expires, or the user says they are no longer working, we close the workbook. Adding the confirmation window does make things a bit more complex, and you can certainly take it out of your project if you do not need it. But for this guy, we are almost good. I'm going to make one note up here. Stop timer goes here, because I'm going to build this in a linear fashion, and we're going to add one more macro call right there in just a moment. But right now, let's go ahead and create the second timer that we need, the one that runs when our confirmation window has appeared. So let's say it runs for 30 seconds. If the user doesn't make a decision in that pop-up window in 30 seconds, the program closes. So we're going to call it start confirmation timer. Give it some space, and basically it's going to be this, just with a little change. So we will make this guy close a workbook. This is the procedure that's going to handle that. And then change this timer. You probably don't want to add 5 minutes. Maybe you want it at 1 minute. That way, they have 1 minute to choose what to do before the, let's say, session expires. So it's kind of like when you log into a financial account online, and if you don't come back for long enough, it says, hey, do you want to continue or not? Now let's go ahead and make a very important procedure, stop timer. And this one we're going to run when we close the workbook, every time we close the workbook, and whenever we need to run it anywhere else in the project. So let's go ahead and do on error resume next, just to make our life a little bit easier. You don't want to throw that guy around everywhere, but it'll be just fine here. So what we're going to do is on time, kill time, and then procedure name, everything's good, comma, we're now on latest time, we're not going to use that argument, comma, one more time, we go to the schedule argument, and we set this guy to false. And what this will do is to stop whatever timer you had running. And since kill time and procedure name are module wide, it doesn't matter if we started the confirmation timer or the main timer, this will stop whichever one is running. And that gets me to another point about how we're going to do things here, because you can do things a million different ways. We're only going to have one timer run at a time. So that's why we're going to be calling stop timer here and stop timer right here. So that whenever we call a timer, if there's any other timer running already, it will automatically be stopped. And putting that here in this procedure just makes sure that in case we forget to put it somewhere else in our code, it's still going to run and keep everything, let's say, happy. So there are many, many ways to do things here. Now let's go with the close this workbook procedure. And this one's going to be relatively easy. First off, let's go ahead and make sure the timer has been stopped. And let's go ahead and, well, what we're going to do, I'll put a note for it here because we haven't made it yet. Unload the user form, which is going to be the confirmation dialog. Are you still working or not? And then we're just going to close the workbook. And let's go this workbook.close. And do you want to have changes saved or not? Sure. Let's go ahead and save any changes that may have been made. And for the last one in this module, we want display a working confirmation. I could have made that maybe a better name, but that's okay. This guy is going to display the little dialog that says, are you working or not? The first thing that I want to do is to start the confirmation timer. And the second thing that I want to do is to show the user form, which we have not yet created. So now that we are done with this module, it is time to go ahead and create the user form. But before I do that, in case you don't want to do the user form, I'm going to go ahead and show you what we're going to do for the events in this workbook. And if you are not confused yet, you may be soon. And that's another reason why I really recommend you go ahead and take my full VBA course, and we'll get you comfortable with what's going on here. And there's a link to that course in the description for this video, so go ahead and check that out. Now let's go to this workbook. What we want to do here is we want to have events that are going to tell us if the user is actually doing something or not. Because the problem is there's no event that says, hey, the user is moving his mouse over here, the user is looking at what's going on. We can't just get a single event like that. We need to check for smaller things. Like, what is the user probably going to be doing? Well, they're probably going to click a cell. They're probably going to input something in the cell. They may want to add a worksheet and go between the worksheets. They may navigate between workbooks. So I'm going to say that's going to encompass over 90% of user interactions in a worksheet. And in case that doesn't encompass everything, that's why we have the confirmation window, so that we don't just accidentally close a workbook that the user is still reading but not actually doing anything in. So we need to check a few different events here. And let's go ahead and start adding them and then add the code. So workbook, and let's go over here. We need workbook close. That's going to be used to make sure everything works in a nice way. So I'll explain that in just a moment. We want before close, sheet activate, sheet selection change, sheet change, and let's grab activate. And make sure to remove workbook open. For before close, this one's not going to help us keep anything open. We just want to make sure that if there's a timer running and the user closes this workbook on their own by hand, just by clicking the X, that the timer has stopped. So we're going to go ahead and put that right there. It runs right before the workbook closes. It's a very helpful event, actually. And you can use it in conjunction with forcing the user to enable macros, which is something that could be quite helpful for this project if you want to implement it on your own, because none of this is going to work if the user has disabled macros. And for these events now, this one's going to be when the workbook's activated. This one's going to be when a sheet is activated, so when you move between the sheets. This one is if you change a value in a sheet, and this one's if you make a selection in a sheet. And all we want to do is to keep calling start main timer. So that way it's going to reset the timer. And that is how we keep things going when the user is doing something. It actually seems pretty easy once you understand what all the events mean and how they work. And now it's time to add the user form. And that's what we're going to use for the little window that asks the user if they're still working or not. So we're going to go insert and user form. And this can get tricky, or not tricky, but it can be confusing if you don't really know what's going on. So we're going to add a label. And let's just say down here for caption, are you still working? Question mark. And let's go down here to font. How about we make this guy a little bit bigger? I'm not going to spend too much time explaining everything here because it would take forever. And wouldn't you know it, that I have a great section for this in my full VBA course. But this is the pop-up window that we are building. Let's go ahead and name this LBL title. And that just names that element in the form, so it's easier to access a little bit later. LBL stands for label. And click the form. And let's go ahead and add some buttons. If you don't see that little toolbox right there, you can go up to a View and click Toolbox, and it'll come back. And we want command buttons, that's what it's called. So click 1 for yes, and 1 for no. Let's click this guy, and let's rename it to CMD for command, and how about yes, and give it a caption of yes. And for this guy, we will go CMD no, and caption no. And how about we change ugly user form 1 to something nice? So first off, let's change the name to FRM confirm, and let's make the caption still working, question mark. And we could spend a lot of time organizing this guy, but I'm going to let you deal with that because it can take a very long time to make it look nice, but it's worth it to do it if you have the time. So let's go ahead and add some code to this guy. Let's make it work. And the easy way to do that is to double click the button that you want to cause to run code. and yes and no we have right here. So let's double click yes, and all the code that runs when the user clicks yes is going to be placed right here. So yes means the user is still working. That means that we don't close the workbook. That means that we need to reset the timer. And how do we do that? Well, we just call start main timer. And remember, that's going to stop any timer currently running and then start the main one. And when we're done with that, let's go ahead and close this window. We don't need it. Unload me is the very easy way to do that. Me because we're already in the form right here, so it refers to the correct object. Now let's go back here and double click no. Just a very easy way to get there. You can also navigate using these guys if you want to. But we are here for no. What do we want to do? All we want to do is to close this workbook. That's it. So our little form is done. It's that easy. Also, a little tip, if you want to make sure this guy looks good when you're building it, go ahead and click it and then hit play or F5, and you can check it out, test everything, make sure it works how you want it to work, and it looks good. And now it is time to attach this form, this user form, to these guys out here. So show the user form, because we're going to run everything from out here basically, and then just call the user form when we need it. So here for display working confirmation, we give the name of the user form. Since we renamed it with FRM as the prefix, it makes our life very easy to find it even if we don't remember the name, because we type FRM, control, space, and it's going to fill it in for us or give us a list of everything that matches. And we just do .show. Easy peasy. Now how about for closing the workbook? Well, just unload and the name of the user form. And believe it or not, that is it. But before I leave you, one very important tip when building your code: test everything. So I just went over my code real quick after pausing this and noticed that I made a little tiny mistake. Close this workbook. Up here, I just wrote close workbook. And this is what happens when I'm reading everything from notes and not necessarily building this the way that you would from scratch, because you wouldn't know all the names of your macros and procedures until you build them first. So I have fixed the error, and one thing I want to mention before we test it out is in this workbook, you may want to use the workbook open event in order to start the initial timer. Now these events down here are probably going to make up for that, so maybe you don't need that. But if you wanted to, go ahead and use workbook, and it was the initial event that was here actually. So workbook open, and then you could start the main timer there as well. But remember that if the user has macros disabled, none of this is going to run. So you may want to add that extra code to force the user to enable macros in order to use this workbook. That's a great thing to combine with this, and really the sky's the limit. You can make this so much more interesting than I'm showing you here. But let's go and test this guy out now. I'm going to go back to module 1 and change the timer so it'll be a little bit smaller. How about 10 seconds? You don't really want to do that in real life. It could be quite annoying. But let's give it a try, and let's make this guy 10 seconds as well. So start confirmation, start main timer, and this guy is going to run the moment that I go in the worksheet and click a cell or navigate around. Back to the worksheet we go, and make sure to go ahead and save this to make sure all the changes are going to take effect. And nothing is going to run yet until I, let's say, select a cell. So right now the main timer has been restarted, and I have just a few moments before the confirmation dialog is going to appear and ask me, hey, are you still working? And yes, I am. So now I have another 10 seconds unless I move around and make some cell selections, go between the worksheets, and do something that our code recognizes as activity. And we should get no dialog box, no user form. Now, you don't want to make it so it's 10 seconds. That's a little bit crazy, but it's great for testing because you don't want to wait 5 minutes to test it out. So in the production environment, go ahead and bump it up to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever you need it to be. And then, if you want to have the little confirmation window, go ahead and add that. If you don't have to have that. Occasionally, depending on how you've set things up, this confirmation window that's about to appear again can cause issues and prevent the workbook actually from closing. So if that happens in your situation, then I want you to go ahead and remove it. Maybe you don't need it. If you make a much longer time, let's say 30 minutes, then the user should probably at least click a single cell once every 30 minutes or go between the worksheets. So in that case, maybe you don't need that little window that confirms if the user is still working or not. But for this tutorial, that's all there is to it. Now let's test the 10 seconds out to see if this guy's going to close the workbook, and it should be right about now. There you go. The workbook is closed, and we have sort of the default Excel workbook interface here. Now remember that you can download the file for this tutorial. I'll put a link to that below this video. And if you want to learn how to do so much more with VBA to automate your workbooks and save you hours and hours of time every single week, and to expand this example even further, then go ahead and check out my full VBA course. It'll take you from beginner and intermediate level all the way to advanced and expert level, and it teaches you so much. It teaches you as well as basic topics, also how to make entire projects from scratch, how to come up with a concept, how to plan it out, how to code it, how to maintain it, and how to build robust, amazing projects in Excel that are going to automate your tasks and save you a lot of time. And there's a link to that course below this video.